LoveLore Library. I've sent people to investigate the soldiers. Besides saving Yang Wanning, they didn't bring any outsiders along the way. That night, the soldiers searched the entire camp for the dead snake but couldn't find it. Strange, where did that basilisk go? Send someone into the mountains to search again. If it's dead, one want to see its corpse. One will bring people over personally. After saying that, Feng turned around and strode out. After he left, the first prince looked at the other two and said, Mr. Zhao, Mr. Chu, I'm sure you've heard about what happened last night. What do you think about the emperor's decision? Why did he put Gu Qingrui under Ping Yang's name? I feel that the emperor is trying to rope him in, my prince. Mr. Zhao spoke up. Rope him in. Yes, you can also say it's to control him. Whether it was the water wheel or the sweet potato, they were rare, excellent findings. It could be said that it was not an exaggeration to say that it saved our country 1,000 years of hard work. No one could guarantee that the couple would again come up with something similar. If there is, with this identity, the emperor can directly take it over instead of getting it through someone else's hands. Chapter 453 Various Families Reaction 8. Also, about the sweet potatoes and the water wheel, Mr. Chu added. Everyone knows what's happening, especially with the white sweet potatoes. If the emperor doesn't give any practical benefits, what would the officials think? The wonderful thing is that the emperor only gave him a title and nothing else. Based on what you said, it seems one really can't touch them. The first prince said it unwillingly. Let's see how it goes. At least for now, we can't touch them. Otherwise, before Mr. Zhao could finish his sentence, the eunuch guarding the door knocked and said, Your Highness, the palace's messenger is here. Oh, that's quite fast. Go and inform the ladies to get ready. One will be right there. Yes. The eunuch turned around and left after that. Wait here, the first prince said. I'll go receive the decree, and we'll continue this topic when one return. After saying that, he stood up and walked out. After a while, he returned and thoughtfully placed the imperial edict on the table. Yang Wanning has been bestowed on my third brother as a concubine. That's a good thing. She can be our spy now that Yang Wanning has entered the third prince's manor. I hope so, and one hope nothing goes wrong. The first prince shook his head at that. I don't think there will be a problem. Firstly, her younger brother, Yang Qinglin, is still in the hands of the Yang family. Secondly, there's also Miss Wanyu, who can openly enter and leave King Rui's manor. Mr. Chu added. All right then, let's take a look at how it goes. The first prince nodded in agreement. Zhou Ying withdrew, and a thoughtful expression flashed across her eyes. It turned out that the empress had a double plan. If Yang Wanning could enter the third prince's residence, she could use Yang. If Yang Wanning could enter the third prince's residence, she could use Yang Wanning to spy on the third prince. Even if it didn't work out, it would sow discord between the couple and affect their future children. If Madame Cui killed her, the empress would not suffer any losses, but she would also have a hold on Madame Cui. The Yang family would only be more loyal to the first prince. It seemed that the empress had calculated this well. Zhou Ying was about to look at the fourth prince's residence when the old butler ran in. Lady Gu, Eunuch Li will be here soon to announce the imperial edict. You and young Master Gu should hurry to the front yard and wait. Thank you, Uncle Feng. We'll be right there. After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she went to the study room to call Gu Qingrui. Then, the two simply tidied themselves up and followed the old butler to the front yard. The third prince was already waiting there when they reached the front courtyard. When he saw them coming, he looked at Gu Qingrui again and instructed, after entering the palace, speak less and listen more. Understood. Gu Qingrui nodded solemnly and stood behind him. Soon, Eunuch Li and other eunuchs arrived. The husband and wife kneeled while the third prince received the imperial edict. The content was to bestow the third prince with 2 concubines. Moreover, the date of marrying the main consort was set for the next month, while the secondary consort would be in February of next year. What surprised Zhou was that Eunuch Li was actually fine when Zhou kneeled. However, she did not know that the emperor, busy with memorials, suddenly fainted in front of the imperial table. The eunuchs and serving girls on duty were so frightened that their faces turned pale. Eunuch Li's disciple, Xiao Detzi, immediately called for the imperial physician while he led his men to help the emperor onto his bed. On the other end, after announcing the imperial edict, Eunuch Li handed 2 copies of the list to the third prince and Gu Qingrui. This is the list of the emperor's rewards. You can take a look at them. After saying that, he asked the guards to bring in their rewards. Thank you for your trouble, Eunuch Li. Please wait a moment, and please sit down for a cup of tea. After the third prince finished speaking, he gave Butler Feng a look. Butler Feng immediately brought everyone else to sit at the side. While serving tea, he also gave them some tea money. Chapter 454 Various Families' Reaction 9. The third prince sent someone to check the 2 lists. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he replied to Eunuch Li, "Since you've confirmed there's no mistake, we still have another mandate to be completed." "Well, take our leave first," Eunuch Li said after receiving the reply. "All right, come over for tea when you have time," the third prince politely offered. Eunuch Li turned his head and said to a young eunuch, "Bring young Master Gu back to the palace to meet the emperor." The young eunuch responded, walked to Gu Qingrui, and bowed. He led the way to the palace immediately after. After Eunuch Li and the others had left, the third prince asked Butler Feng to store his rewards in the warehouse while storing Gu Shengruo's reward in the guest courtyard. Just as he was about to go out for something, a guard suddenly ran over and said, "Greetings, King Rui. The emperor is unconscious, and the Empress Dowager has invited all the princes into the palace." "What? Unconscious? What happened?" the third prince asked hurriedly. "I'm not sure either. I only know that he fainted while he was reviewing a memorial. Let's go." The third prince immediately followed him and ran to the imperial palace. Seeing this, Butler Feng quickly arranged for a carriage to catch up. Zhou touched her nose thoughtfully, then followed the servant carrying the rewards back to the guest courtyard. After storing them in a small storeroom, she immediately sent her consciousness to the fourth prince's manor. As expected, Eunuch Li was already there. After receiving the imperial edict, the fourth prince also inquired about the third prince and the seventh prince's consorts. After Eunuch Li left, the fourth prince was silent momentarily before saying, "Yang Wanning was actually given to my third brother. Interesting. Father is starting to suppress my eldest brother." Seventh Su, the seventh son of the Su family, walked over casually and replied, "Cousin, you have to be careful. Minister Hong is the emperor's diehard supporter. We've repeatedly asked him for help, but he rejected us. That depends on how you see this. At least his daughter isn't bestowed on my eldest or third brother." The fourth prince replied and looked at Seventh Su deeply. Seventh Su was stunned momentarily before smiling and saying, "That's true. We're still relatively safe compared to them. It was just a woman, and it would be easy for them to guard against her. Also, it was beneficial for them to get in touch with the Hong family. By the way, I heard that the emperor summoned Gu Qingrui into the palace. Is that so? What exactly is the emperor?" Just as the fourth prince was about to turn around and return to his residence, a guard ran over to reporting to King Kong, "The emperor has fainted. The Empress Dowager has summoned all the princes into the palace." "What?" The fourth prince and seventh master Su looked at each other solemnly. They would be in a bad position if something happened to the emperor. The fourth prince immediately handed the imperial edict to seventh Su and ordered his servants to prepare a carriage. He then rushed to the palace with his guards. Zhou then turned to look at the palace. At this time, the emperor had already woken up. Although he was a little dispirited, he was still fine. The Empress Dowager and Empress were guarding him. The third prince caught up to Gu Qingrui, let him get into the carriage, and rushed all the way into the back of the palace. After entering the palace, the third prince brought Gu Qingrui into a side hall while he himself entered the study. Seeing that the emperor had woken up, he heaved a sigh of relief and asked, "Are you all right, father?" The emperor shook his head and didn't say anything. It was the Empress Dowager who answered, "The imperial physician said your father's fine but just too tired. He will need to rest more." "That's great to hear." The Empress Dowager looked at the emperor and said, "Your Majesty, we'll take our leave. Have a good sleep." The emperor nodded and looked at the third prince, saying, "Bring Gu Qingrui along for the morning court session tomorrow." "Yes, father. Please take your rest." After the third prince finished speaking, he left the study with the Empress Dowager, the Empress, and the fourth prince's mother, Consort Shu. Chapter 455 Various Families Reaction 10. When the third prince came out, he happened to run into the first prince and the fourth prince. They paused after bumping into each other, and the first prince hurriedly asked, "Grandmother, mother, how is father?" "He's fine. It's just that he has been tired recently. He'll be fine after a good rest." The Empress Dowager hesitated momentarily before adding, "Since you're here, go in and visit him. However, don't disturb your father if he's asleep." "Understood, Imperial Grandmother." The two princes walked into the emperor's study with light footsteps after that. The empress then said to the third prince, "Third prince, I think you have received the imperial edict. Marrying a consort is a major event in one's life, so you have to prepare as soon as possible. Later, I will send over Granny Qiao to help you. Isn't the first prince also marrying a secondary consort? You still have to manage the palace affairs, so you'll need the extra help. I'll send over Granny Lu to help the third prince," the Empress Dowager said. "Many thanks for mother's concern. I can rest assured with Granny Lu helping out." The Empress nodded in agreement. However, she clenched her fists silently. "Thank you, Imperial Grandmother." The third prince stepped forward to support the Empress Dowager. "All right, let's go. Come with me. I'll get Granny Lu to return with you and get you ready in a while." "All right." The third prince nodded and told someone to inform Gu Qingrui to return home before following the Empress Dowager to her longevity palace. It looks like the Empress Dowager still likes the third prince the most. Consort Shu shook her head and replied with a helpless expression. She then turned around and gradually walked away with the help of her palace maids. The Empress sneered and ignored her. She waited for the first prince to come out before leaving with him. After Gu Qingrui learned that he did not need to see the emperor, he heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he was a little unhappy. This was just a word from the emperor, and he had to run all the way here. If he didn't know that the emperor was actually sick, he would have thought the emperor was deliberately making things difficult for him. Suddenly, he thought of something, and his body stiffened. Gu Qingrui hurriedly followed the young eunuch out of the palace after that. Meanwhile, Zhou found Eunuch Li and his group again, noticing they had just left the Sun family. Initially, she thought that the Sun family would be thrilled to receive the imperial edict. She didn't expect only Mrs. Sun to smile while Grand Scholar Sun politely sent Eunuch Li out. As for Sun Miaoke, not only was she not delighted by the announcement, but her face went pale with her eyes staring into the distance. She looked desperate and did not notice that the imperial edict in her hand was about to fall to the ground. When Mrs. Sun noticed her abnormality, she immediately went forward to take the imperial edict and dragged her daughter to the backyard. After helping her sit down, Mrs. Sun's heart tightened when she saw that her daughter looked like a dead person. She raised her hand and waved it in front of her eyes. "Meow meow, what's wrong? Don't scare me." After saying that, Mrs. Sun shook Sun Myok's shoulders after noticing she didn't react. Only then did Sun Myauka come back to her senses. She raised her head and looked at Mrs. Sunday. However, she did not say a word, and her tears flowed down quickly. Mrs. Sun panicked, and her expression changed when she thought of something. She softly asked, "Myauka, don't tell me you have someone you like." Sun Myauka couldn't hold it in anymore and started crying. "Don't cry. Tell me what happened." "Mother, I like Cousin Yen." Sun Myauka replied with a sob. Mrs. Sun was stunned for a moment and asked, "By Cousin Yen, you mean Yen Hengdong?" Sun Miao nodded with a red face. Mother Sun sighed after hearing this and replied with grief, What do you want me to say? Why didn't you say something earlier? Now that the imperial edict has been issued, do you want your entire family to be buried with you?" Chapter 456 Various Families Reaction 11. But, didn't Cousin Yen leave to serve the army? Lois said that after this training is over. Now, Sun Myauka cried as she replied chokingly. "What now? It's too late." Mrs. Sun said angrily. Initially, she quite liked the third prince because he was the most noteworthy among the princes. She thought she had snagged a good son-in-law and didn't expect such troubles. She advised, "Let's end this discussion here. During this period, stay at home and adjust your mood. You'll marry the third prince in a month." "Mother, it's too late to say anything now. If you don't want the entire Sun residence buried with you, you should obediently marry him. Moreover, the third prince is not only capable, but he is also good-looking. He is a rare, good man. But his personality is too cold. Yen Hengdong has a good temper, but he has a concubine. He's less devoted than you think. Since this imperial edict has been issued, you should properly sort out your emotions and marry the third prince." At this time, Grand Scholar Sun walked in and added, "Father, when did you arrive?" Sun Myauka looked at Sun the scholar with a guilty look. "I was right behind you. I admit that Yen Hengdong is not bad, but he is not worth it for us to risk our lives to go against the emperor. But, think about it carefully. Why did he already have a concubine if he really liked you?" "That's right, meow meow. The one who loves the most will be the one who hurts the most. He has a concubine now and will have more in the future. Are you willing to serve a man with so many women?" Mrs. Sun reasoned. "The third prince will also have one in the future." "Yes, but you don't have such deep feelings for the third prince. Moreover, as long as you manage your marriage well, you can get a fulfilling marriage." After Mrs. Sun finished speaking, she walked out with Grand Scholar Sunday. Sun Myauka was left alone in the room, crying silently. After she calmed down, she started to daydream. Finally, Shouing turned to the Yang family, noticing they were still waiting for eunuch Li's arrival. Yang Wanyu, on the other hand, was clearly overjoyed, indicating they had already received some news about it. Mrs. Chui, on the other hand, was both pleased and concerned. Yang Shiqing's expressionless face made it difficult to guess what he was thinking. Meanwhile, the old madam sat inside, leaning against a chair and pretending to be asleep. Roughly 15 minutes later, Eunuch Li and the others finally came to announce the edict. After sending off Eunuch Li, Mrs. Chui went up to support her mother and said, "Mother, Wanyu is about to get married. You must give Wanyu a few good things as her dowry. That's for sure. No matter what, she will be a secondary consort and can't be wedded off shabbily." Madame Chui smiled and answered, "Grandma is right. Young Wanning stepped forward and said, "You'll have to trouble Grandma to take care of my dowry too. You're not part of our family. How can you ask for a dowry?" Mrs. Chui turned her head and glared at her in dissatisfaction. "My biological mother is gone, and you're busy preparing Wanya's dowry. One can only ask Grandma for help. Why are you in such a hurry? Your wedding date is after Wanya's, so it won't be too late to prepare yours after she gets married. It's only less than half a month away. If you guys are too busy, why don't you return me my mother's dowry? I'll prepare it myself." Young Wanning's expression suddenly hardened. "You, Mrs. Chui was stunned momentarily, then she replied angrily, "You, what do you mean by that? Are you afraid that we will steal your mother's dowry?" Chapter 457 Demanding a Dowry, That's hard to say. Young Wanning replied without hesitation. Although she couldn't say that she was completely clear about the Young family's financial situation, she still had some understanding. 70% of the Young family's expenses came from her mother's dowry. The Young family had only been established for just a little over 10 years, so their foundation was relatively thin. Preparing a decent dowry without touching her mother's dowry was impossible. What would happen to her and her brother if they removed a significant share? They would not fool her like they had in her previous life. Back then, they had spent her mother's dowry and abused her child in various ways. "You," Mrs. Chui wanted to say something, but Yang Shiqing interrupted her with a roar, "Enough, what are you all arguing about? You two sisters are both secondary consorts, so we will provide the same dowry." "I hope so." Young Wanning looked at them with distrust, then turned around and returned to her courtyard. "Look at how her mother teaches her children. Is this how you should talk to your elders?" Madame Chui looked at her back and scolded loudly. Young Wanning ignored them and continued walking forward. Yang Shiqing was also angry, but he did not want to let the servants see him as a joke. Otherwise, how could he continue to serve the imperial court if word got out? After that, he quickly said, "All right, all of you go back and discuss the dowry on your own. One have to go change my clothes and head to the bailiff station." After saying that, he hurriedly returned to his room. Mrs. Chui and her daughter looked at each other and did not say anything else. They went back with Madame Chui to discuss the dowry. At the same time, Mrs. Chui had also made up her mind to get rid of Yang Wanning. Otherwise, if they were to offer too expensive dowries, their family's good days would come to an end. After Yang Wanning returned, she asked her personal maid, Chun Shi, "Have you found Granny Qian?" "I found her at the Hot Spring Manor. She's now in charge of raising chickens there. As long as she's safe for now, it's fine. By the way, have you developed the grapevine I asked you to?" "Yes, basically every courtyard has one of us. It's just that it's not easy to arrange one at the old master's side. Let's not worry about him for now, and let's deal with Mrs. Chui first, especially since they emptied the Yang family's coffers to subsidize the Chui family." "Understood. I'll keep an eye on this matter. Tell everyone to be careful, especially regarding food. Make sure to check before eating." After Yang Wanning finished speaking, she paused and asked, "Is eldest young master returning to the residence tomorrow?" "Yes, he'll be here the day after tomorrow and the day after." "All right, help me prepare some fine rice and fine noodles tomorrow. The day after tomorrow, one have to make some snacks to bring him to meet my cousin and cousin-in-law." "Yes, Chun," she replied. Finally, Zhou glanced at the Zhou residence. As expected, Zhou Jiaqing was covered in rashes and couldn't rush to the manor. She was obediently nestled in her room, copywriting a book as punishment. After Zhou looked around, she noticed Gu Qingrui had returned. She quickly got up and asked, "Have you seen the emperor?" "No, he said he was too tired and had to postpone it." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he glanced around the room and asked softly, "Is the Emperor's fainting related to you?" Zhou Ying shook her head. "I'm not too sure. Maybe it's because I'm too far away, so I couldn't feel anything. But that could be the case. The timing is too coincidental." Gu Qingrui did not overthink it after hearing that. Instead, he asked, "How was your harvest today?" Zhou Ying told him everything she had heard about the families, especially regarding the first and fourth princes. She told him in detail what the emperor thought of them. Chapter 458. Looking around the residence, reining in and taking control. Gu Qingrui was slightly surprised when he heard her words but quickly understood what she meant. From the looks of it, the emperor's actions were to suppress the princes and even sow discord between them so that he could stay on the throne longer. Of course, the emperor was also using the couple and also trying to control them. It seemed that making the old thing faint and vomit blood once was still too light of a punishment. "Oh, right," Zhou Ying added. "Yang Wanning will bring her brother, Yang Qinglin, to visit us the day after tomorrow. I was just about to discuss this with you. Since the emperor has given us a residence, should we move out? Let's go over and take a look first. If we can live there, well, go over. If we can't, well, take the time to repair it. All right, let's take a look after dinner." Gu Qingrui nodded. After the meal, the two brought Granny Ma from the courtyard to look for their bestowed residence. They didn't expect that it was in the alley beside the third prince's residence. It was a 3-entrance residence. The two had just entered when a white-haired old man with a crippled leg walked out. He sized Gu Qingrui up and asked, "Are you Scholar Gu Qingrui?" "That's right. Him. You're the old man who guards this residence. Uncle Zheng, right?" Yes, that's me. I cleaned the residence up after receiving the notice. Come, 111 bring you guys in for a walk." After Uncle Zheng finished speaking, he led them into the residence. After entering, they counted 11 rooms. While on the way to the second entrance of the residence, they noticed a rockery pond on the east side that covered half an acre of land. Some lotus roots were planted in it, some goldfish were swimming around, and 2 pavilions were built over it. On the west side was a bamboo forest with 2 adjacent courtyards. The second entrance of the residence had 3 independent courtyards that were connected by corridors. The central courtyard had 5 rooms, while the 2 side courtyards only had 3. From the 2 sides of the corridor to the back, a large garden occupied an area of about 1 acre. On the left side of the backyard were the servant rooms. On the right were the stable and a warehouse. When they finished looking at the entire residence, they knew it was pretty well preserved, and they could move in with just a bit more cleaning. After the couple finished looking around, they were surprised. Overall, this residence was more than decent, so Zhou Ying asked curiously, "Uncle Zheng, who did this residence belong to before?" The previous owner was Princess Ping Yang. It was her dowry. Uncle Zheng replied. The husband and wife looked at each other and understood why the specifications of a 3-entry residence were so grand. "Are you alone here now?" "Yes, I'm the only one here. When one have nothing to do, it'll help to air the rooms. When something breaks, you'll find someone to mend it. It's quite an easy job. Will you continue to stay?" Uncle Zheng shook his head. "No, I don't have an official position, and am still working as a bailiff. After you've checked and accepted it, 111 have to report back. If that's the case, please help us guard it for 2 more days. We'll officially take over in 2 days." Gu Qingrui asked. "Then it's settled." Uncle Zheng nodded and led them out. After coming out, Zhou Ying looked at the old woman who followed her and said, "Granny Ma, do you know where to buy firewood?" "You want to buy firewood?" Granny Ma paused momentarily and replied, someone specially delivers the firewood to our manor at a fair price. Why don't we ask them to deliver some to you directly? It saves us the trouble of bargaining. That's a good idea. I'll heed your advice. Showing nodded. After returning, the husband and wife requested Granny Ma to help them pass a message to the kitchen. The husband and wife found Butlet Fong and asked him to introduce them to a group of masons and carpenters. After that, the two went to the shop the emperor had rewarded them. We'll need to buy someone to keep an eye on the place and clean it up occasionally. Otherwise, if it is not maintained, it will deteriorate further. We'll see. If my adoptive mother and her family are willing to stay after we get them out, we'll hand this place over to them. We'll only think about buying someone if they don't want to take up the job. All right. By the way, when do you plan to get her out? It's troublesome to pay a visit to anyone in the capital. We'll have to send a visiting card in advance. Tomorrow. 111 Go over after breakfast tomorrow. As for a visiting card, we only send them when we visit. We won't be needing them. Besides, even if we send them in advance, they might not reply. All right, 111 Go with you tomorrow. Gu Qingrui nodded. However, after dinner, she discovered that Gu Qingrui was following the third prince into the palace tomorrow morning. Gu Qingrui had no choice but to say, "It'd be better if you follow Uncle Feng tomorrow and bring the craftsmen to the residence to clean it up." Zhou hesitated for a moment before agreeing. If the Zhou family threatened her, it would be difficult for her to escape without revealing her trump card. Chapter 4 63rd grade farming officer Zhou did not let Gu Qingrui enter her inner space at night and asked him to sleep early instead. Gu Qingrui woke up early the next day and followed the third prince into the palace. Zhou couldn't fall asleep after waking up, so she got up soon after he left. After washing up, she went straight to the small garden in the courtyard and started practicing her boxing. When the sun rose, Granny Ma walked over and said, "Lady Gu, I finally found you. The firewood seller is here and is waiting in the courtyard." So early. Zhou stopped her workout after hearing that. Not really. They live far away. If it's summer, they will come even earlier. Are you familiar with him? To tell you the truth, my nephew, Ma Dolly, is the one selling firewood. I helped to pull some strings. Granny Ma said embarrassedly, "Don't misunderstand, as the firewood he sells is cheap. The imperial residence has been using it for several years. It's just firewood. As long as the firewood is of good quality and the price is fair, it doesn't matter who I buy it from." Yes, yes. Granny Ma breathed a sigh of relief. When they returned to the courtyard, they saw a man in his 30s sitting on a stone. When he saw them enter, he immediately stood up and smiled at them. Zhou saw his clear eyes and knew he was not a cunning person. She nodded and asked, "Ma Dolly, right? Other than the firewood from the prince's residence, how much more can you send over every day?" "Madam, how much do you want?" "If you want more, I can ask the villagers for some help." "You're smart. How about this, you hurry up and send a batch to Wudong Lane next door. I'll need about 100 stones." Ma Dolly was delighted after hearing that, knowing this was a big job. He nodded and replied, "All right, 10 days, and I'll definitely deliver everything to you." "Great, let's price it according to the price you've given the prince's residence. This is the deposit, and I'll pay the rest when the firewood arrives." Zhou gave him a tael of silver after that. "Thank you, I'll start sending them over tomorrow." After Ma Dolly finished speaking, he turned around and walked out. After dinner, Zhou went to find Butler Feng. Knowing he had gone to their residence, she immediately rushed over. After telling them how to renovate the place, Zhou also told them to connect the entire residence to a fireplace. She then handed this over to Uncle Jing to help keep an eye on it before returning to the imperial residence. When she returned, Gu Qingrui was already waiting in the living room. However, he looked depressed. Zhou went forward and asked, "What's wrong? Did the emperor make things difficult for you?" "Not really. He set up a branch under the Ministry of Works. After the morning court passed the agreement, I was asked to take on the role of a third-grade farming officer, specializing in researching how to increase the yield of crops. Promoting sweet potatoes in the capital is my first mission. Why would you agree to that? What about practicing medicine?" "Of course, I didn't agree, but the emperor said I'd be taking over just for now. He'll replace me when he finds a more suitable official." "Bullshit, what if he doesn't find one?" "No matter what, we won't be able to leave for a while. I guess you have to bear it for now. We'll talk about it after you promote the sweet potatoes. That's the only way. Fortunately, one have a proper income now." Gu Qingrui added, "It's a good time to try to grow greenhouse vegetables, and we can use this to earn some money during the new year. What if the emperor doesn't let you go after seeing yet another successful project? In order to reopen the restaurant, we'll have to plant these vegetables sooner or later. It's better to include it in our performance now. Alright, there's a manor here. After we clean up the residence, we'll head over." "I have the same thought." Gu Qingrui stood up. "Let's go. Aren't we going to the Zhou family? Let's go over now." Chapter 461 Redemption 1. After Zhou prepared to pay 1,000 taels of silver to buy over her adoptive mother and her family, they walked straight to the Zhou family. After the two reached the entrance, the guard hesitated momentarily before inviting them in and saying, "The two of you wait here for a moment. I will report to the old madam." "Alright, just say we have something to discuss with the old madam." Zhou nodded and sat in the gatehouse. Seeing this, the servant did not dare to delay and immediately turned around to run inside. When Madame Zhou received the news, she was surprised. She hadn't expected Zhou to visit them suddenly. At the same time, she was also puzzled, unsure why Zhou had come to visit her this time. However, when she thought of their relationship with the third prince, she finally agreed to meet them. When Zhou and Gu Qingrui came in, Madame Zhou was already waiting in the room. "Greetings, Madame Zhou." The two of them stepped forward and bowed. Madame Zhou's heart skipped a beat. "Have a seat. You said that you have something to discuss. I wonder what it is." Zhou saw that she had gone straight to the point, so she no longer stood on ceremony. She sat down and said, "We only have one purpose for coming here this time, which is to redeem my adoptive mother's family. Please name a price." "Your adoptive mother? You mean our original chef, Mrs. Chiu, and her family?" "Yes, them." The old madam hesitated momentarily and said, "Sure, but I have a condition." "What is it?" "From now on, all our past grudges are cleared. A price of 100 taels of silver per person is also needed." Zhou deliberately looked at Gu Qingrui with a troubled expression, but she was very surprised internally. She didn't expect the old lady to agree to their request so readily. Gu Qingrui was surprised at the same time, but he still nodded without showing any emotion. "Sure. Please remember, madam, that we will not cross paths anymore." "I disagree. If you want to take Qiu Nyang and her family away, you must kowtow to me 3 times. Zhou Jiaqing ran in with a veil over her face. "Kowtowing 3 times is used to worship the dead." Zhou smiled. "You?" Zhou Jiaqing was momentarily stunned and at a loss for words. She wanted to retort something, but Madame Zhou interrupted, "All right, this has nothing to do with you. Hurry up and go back to your room. Don't forget that you still have a rash. At the same time, the old madam looked at Zhou Ying's calm behavior and Zhou Jiaqing's impulsive actions, regretting her past actions deeply. She did not expect that a daughter of their family who was left alone would be more outstanding than the one they had carefully nurtured. How could she accept this? Regardless, their mistakes had already been made, so there was no need to pester them anymore. Otherwise, the Zhou family would lose all their dignity. The key was that the third prince and the other Zhou family were backing them up. There was no need for both sides to make things too ugly. Zhou Jiaqing hesitated for a moment, only then remembering her crafted personality. Ultimately, she could only glare at Zhou Ying fiercely, turn around, and leave unwillingly. When Madame Zhou saw this, she turned to look at her maidservant. Her personal maidservant understood immediately, left, and found Qiunyang's family's contract. She stamped it with the old madam's private seal and handed it to Zhou Ying. There are 9 people, men, women, old and young. Zhou Ying took it and examined it. Qiunyang's father-in-law died, but Zhou Ying's childhood playmate, Qiunyang's daughter, Sister Haitang, was married and gave birth to a daughter. She put it away and took out 900 taels of silver. All right, you go ahead and have a nice day. We won't disturb you any further. I won't send you off. Madame Zhou nodded. Zhou Ying nodded and walked out with Gu Qingrui. Seeing Qiunyang, whose hair was already white and had aged a lot, Zhou Ying felt tears welling inside her. She went forward and cried out, "Mother Qiu, Ying'er is back to bring you home." Mother Qiu was stunned for a moment. When she saw Zhou Ying, she stood up excitedly. "Ying'er! You're back. You're really back." "Yes, I've already obtained your family's contract. Pack up and follow me." "Go, where to?" "I have my own house and manor, you can go wherever you want. One can return your contract to you if you want to return to your hometown." After Qiunyang heard this, she noticed Gu Qingrui beside her and asked in confusion, "But isn't the Gu family? Won't there be any trouble with you returning to the capital?" "No." Zhou Ying shook her head and told them about the reward for the sweet potato. "Good, good. It's good that you've been exonerated. That's just great." When Qiunyang said this, she looked at the food on the table and smiled. "Wait a moment, and I'll make some noodles for you." Chapter 463 Redemption 3:0 Head. Do take a seat first and have a meal here. Qiunyang's husband, Zhou Dashing, said this to the head of the manor. The manor's head waved his hand at Zhou Dashing and said, "It's not easy for you to reunite, so I won't disturb you anymore. Just remember to give me the keys here when you leave." At the same time, Zhou Ying quickly stopped Mother Qiu and said, "Mother Qiu, there's no need. We came over after eating, so please sit down and eat. After eating, pack your things. We still have to return to the capital." After Zhou Dashing sent off the village head, he returned and sat down. He looked at the couple and asked, "Did you really eat?" "Uncle Zhou, we really have eaten. So, don't worry and have your meal." Zhou Ying nodded. After Zhou Dashing confirmed that they had eaten, he called the family for their lunch. "Mother Qiu, where's Sister Haitang?" Zhou Ying asked after the meal. "Isn't she staying with you?" "No, they live alone. You guys take a seat while I go get them now." After Qiunyang finished speaking, she asked Zhou Dashing and his son to pack up. After that, she left in a hurry. Zhou Ying looked at Zhou Dashing and said, "Uncle Zhou, what do you think? If you want to get rid of your status as a serf, one can give you 100 acres of land or a small shop. You can live your lives well in the future." Zhou Dashing hesitated for a moment. Honestly, He was born into this family and was used to being a servant. He was also used to menial work and wanted to avoid taking the risk of heading out to work alone. However, he looked at his two grandchildren, especially his youngest grandson, Zhou Xiaoniu. This kid was quick-witted and had a steady personality. If he was nurtured correctly, he might be able to succeed. Even if they were to become scholars, they could overturn their family background. Since there was a chance now, he did not want them to follow him and be serfs anymore. Finally, he looked at his son, Zhou Dong. What about you? What do you think of leaving and surviving on your own? We will listen to you, father. Zhou Dong hesitated for a moment and replied. Honestly, he couldn't stand the tiredness of farming, but he also didn't have the confidence to do business. It was better to be an honest serf and earn a monthly salary. His wife, Mrs. Zhao, looked at Zhou Ying and asked, Sister Ying, are you really willing to set us free? Of course, Uncle Zhou and Mother Qiu treat me like their own daughter. It's only right to give you a chance to choose your future. Zhou Ying nodded and replied. We want to be free. I want the children to have more choices. Mrs. Zhao said it with anticipation. After saying that, she tugged at Zhou Dong. For the sake of our descendants, let's get rid of our serfdom. Zhou Dong looked at Zhou Dashing hesitantly. Zhou Dashing looked at his son's hesitation and shook his head. You can make your own decision. However, your mother and I are still capable, and we will work with Zhou Ying for a few more years. We want to be free from serfdom. Under Mrs. Zhao's repeated urging, Zhou Dong finally braced himself and announced his decision. Zhou Dong, what do you mean? What do you mean by leaving serfdom? Qiu Nyang walked in and asked. Haitang's family followed behind. Zhou Ying did not expect that Haitang's husband was also an acquaintance of hers, nicknamed Biaozi, who had been an apprentice in the kitchen back then. Learning that his name was Qi Yonglin was a pleasant surprise to her. Sister Haitang, brother Biaozi, Zhou Ying greeted them with a smile. Yinger, one didn't expect to see you again in this life. Haitang walked over and wiped her tears. The heavens don't want us to be separated, so I returned. If you're willing, we can always be together in the future. Zhou Ying took out a handkerchief and handed it to her. Chapter 464 Redemption 4. On the other end, Zhou Dashing also told Qiu Nyang about Zhou Ying wanting to set them free and their decision. Of course, Qi Yonglin also heard it and looked at the couple in surprise. What do you think, Brother Qi? Gu Qingrui nodded and asked. If you want to get rid of your serfdom, 111 do it for you when we return to the capital. If you don't want to and want to improve your cooking skills, you can become a chef in our restaurant when it opens. Box novel. You guys are planning to open a restaurant? Qi Yonglin's eyes lit up. Yes, there is a restaurant among the Emperor's rewards. However, there is a shortage of ingredients now, so we must wait a year and a half before it can operate smoothly. Qi Yonglin and Haitang looked at each other. Ultimately, the two of them decided to stay, but the child would no longer be a serf. After that, the two families quickly packed their stuff, rented 2 ox carts, and returned to the capital together. After arriving in the capital, Zhou Ying went to the bailiff's office to complete the procedures according to their request. She temporarily arranged for their family to live in their residence's backyard. She also asked them to keep an eye on the renovation. After they left, Mrs. Zhao took their household registration and said excitedly, I didn't expect that we would be freed from serfdom. Alright, this is a good thing for the future of the 2 children. But this time, we're in significant debt to them. With our family situation, taking the initiative to redeem ourselves will cost us at least 50 taels each. So you all must remember this favor in the future. Also, consider whether you want to return to the village to farm or stay here. You could do some small business if you choose to stay here. But no matter what you do, you can't stay in this residence for long and must find a place to live quickly. Xiao Nyang reminded them. Indeed. Since you're no longer a serf, staying here for long is not good. Zhou Dashing echoed. Since none of you are returning to the village, we will stay here too. We want to have a shop and do some small business. Zhou Dong said. Mrs. Xiao pondered for a moment and did not refute. Firstly, the Capita's Academy was a great chance for their children. Secondly, her parents-in-law were all here, and they could help each other out if there was anything. Moreover, her mother-in-law and sister-in-law were both skilled. They wouldn't lose money even if they opened a small shop selling food or snacks. What do you mean you want a shop? Even if Ying'er has an empty shop, you can use it but can't take it for yourself. Otherwise, you might as well stay as a serf. Moreover, if you earn money from that shop, even if you don't pay the rent, you must show gratitude. Otherwise, it will lead to problems sooner or later. Indeed. Although Ying'er grew up with our mother's milk, she's only indebted to our parents, not us. Haitang echoed. Zhou Dong opened his mouth after hearing this but did not say anything else. After all, they needed Zhou Ying's protection if they wanted to stay in the capital. They could only go so far with their requests. On the other end, Zhou Ying heaved a sigh of relief after hearing their conversation. If they did not know their limits, she planned to pay off her debts to them in one go and reduce their interactions in the future. When they returned, the sky had already darkened. Just as they were about to return to the guest courtyard, one of the third prince's personal guards, Guard Chu, walked over and said, Lord Gu, Lady Gu, His Highness invites you to the main courtyard for dinner when you return. Gu Qingrui was initially surprised, but he knew there was a problem that needed to be discussed. He said, Please lead the way, Guard Chu. Please. After Guard Chu finished speaking, he made an inviting gesture and led them to the main courtyard. After entering the courtyard, they saw that Zhou Huaiming was also there. Gu Qingrui had already guessed an inkling of what was happening. As expected, the third prince spoke before they could. I invited you here for two purposes. One is to celebrate Brother Gus' advancement to becoming a third-grade officer in farming, and the other is my cousin's leaving. Chapter 465 Leaving. Brother Zhou is leaving again. Gu Qingrui was shocked by this. Yes, the soldiers we brought here must return as soon as possible, just in case. The third prince nodded. Do you want to send a letter back? We're going back by water this time and will pass by Qingshui town. We can help you send a letter back home. Zhou Huaiming said. You'll have to trouble Brother Zhou to help us send a letter back. I'll write it after dinner. All right, let's eat. Zhou Huaiming then asked the servant girl beside him to inform the kitchen to serve the food. Box novel. Gu Qingrui and Zhou Ying went to wash their hands and then sat back down. I heard that you've started renovating the residence over there. The third prince asked. Yes, it's mainly the fireplace and heated floors. Otherwise, it'll be too cold in the winter. Other than that, we're just giving a fresh coat of paint to the whales and the like. Nothing much. Heated floor. Gu Qingrui nodded and then briefly explained the principle to them. Insulated walls are technically better, but it will be tough to renovate once those insulated walls are erected. It sounds more convenient and cleaner than a portable fireplace. When you move over, one will go over and try it out. If feasible, the imperial residence will be renovated the same way, and one can save a lot of money. You're more than welcome. One wanted to invite you guys over for an open house once our residence is fully renovated. One didn't expect Brother Zhou to leave so early. Don't worry. When one get married, he will come back. We'll meet again then. Zhou Huaiming was in a good mood when he heard the third prince mention his marriage. A dark flint flashed in his eyes when he remembered the information he had found. If Sun Miaoke listened to his advice, it would be all fine. Otherwise, this marriage would be quite a troublesome business. The dishes were served just then, and the four stopped chatting and started eating. After the meal, Gu Qingrui borrowed the third prince's study to write a letter to his family, especially mentioning that the Gu family had been exonerated. However, he also reminded them to keep a low profile as much as possible in case they were targeted again. Here, Brother Zhou. Also, when you return to the capital, see if there are any extra vegetable seeds in the village and bring some back for me. No problem. Let's meet again when I'm back. Zhou Huaiming kept the letter well. However, he had no intention of getting up to leave. Gu Qingrui immediately understood and said, "You guys continue chatting. Well, go back first. Remember to attend the morning court assembly together tomorrow." The third prince reminded him. Gu Qingrui nodded and went home with Zhou Ying. After they left, Zhou Huaiming hesitated momentarily before handing the information he had found on Sun Miaoke to the third prince. Sun Miaoke has someone she likes. I wonder who she will choose in the end. The third prince's eyes narrowed after hearing that. He flipped through the information and said, whether it's the rumors or the various investigations, they all praised her for being talented, strong, and decisive. I guess it was all exaggeration. This might be a common problem for women. Once it comes to feelings, they become indecisive. The third prince nodded and did not reply. Instead, he asked, "People are watching her, right?" "Yes, I heard it has been hushed these 2 days. She must be considering the gains and losses. You can talk to Chu Fan. If there's any news, just send it to me. You plan to, I'll wait for their decision. It's up to her." "Understood. I'll set off now. Go. Bring enough people and be careful on the way." After the third prince finished speaking, he stood up and sent him out of the courtyard. Madame Zhou discovered Gu Qingrui had become a third-grade farming officer while the Zhou family sat together and chatted. "Damn," she said regretfully. Chapter 466. Not worried, mother, what's wrong? Principal Zhou looked at her in confusion. Madame Zhou did not hide anything and told him about Zhou Ying buying over Qiu Nyang's family today. She also said she had proposed breaking off her relationship with Zhou Ying. Principal Zhou was surprised after hearing this. "It seems that we are not fated to be together. This is fine. We will mind our own business in the future." "That's right. If it's broken, so be it." A third-grade officer of agriculture is just another word for farmer. It's only because the emperor favors him. Otherwise, how could a scholar like him enter the imperial court? Second Uncle Zhou said sourly. Box novel. Calm, however, he was quite envious. His elder brother had been in the Imperial Academy of Medicine for half his life, and he was only a fourth-grade official. Gu Qingrui, a young scholar, relied on farming and became a third-grade officer in one step. Who wouldn't be jealous of this? The old madam nodded in agreement. That's true. A farming officer, at most, will lead a few old farmers. They won't have the power or influence of an actual officer. Although the others did not say anything, they also assumed that Gu Qingrui would not have little potential. Of course, they were still envious of Gu Qingrui getting a third-grade official position. At the very least, his monthly salary and status were higher than theirs. When she heard the news, Zhou Jiaqing, who was lying on her bed, covered her head and groaned. She was so enraged that she jumped out of bed and spat. Why? Why did that scumbag become a third-grade official? No wonder Zhou Ying is so arrogant now. She has a backer and doesn't need to be careful around me anymore, huh? The servant girl who reported this to her did not dare to say a word. Zhou Jiaqing thought of something and asked, by the way, did Zissou bring that bitch Haitang back? Miss, Sister Zissou saw that you were unconscious and was too focused on saving you. So, she didn't have the time to go over. Zhou Jiaqing was so angry that she threw her cup on the ground and yelled, bitch, there are so many of you good-for-nothings. Do you need her to stay? Get her to come here. After shouting, she felt dizzy, and her head felt like needles were prickling into it. Zhou Jiaqing immediately fell onto her bed and hugged her head as she cried out in pain. The servant girl was shocked by this and immediately turned around to call for Principal Zhou. On the other end, Yang Wanning smiled after receiving the news. As for the first prince and the others, they didn't take Gu Shengruo's promotion to heart. After all, he was just a farmer and had nothing to do with them. Early the next morning, Zhou asked Granny Ma to lead her to a nearby market. She wanted to buy vegetables to prepare food at her new residence to entertain Yang Wanning. Few people were in the market, and most of the vegetables sold were dried wild vegetables. Of course, some were selling carrots and cabbages, but the quantity was tiny, and the price was high. 1 pound of cabbage was being sold for 2 coppers. There were also people selling firewood, wild animals, and fish. As for the proper butcher shops, only one sold pork, but the meat was lean, and they were selling it for 30 copper coins per pound. She looked at Granny Ma and asked, does the prince's manor have its own farm to provide daily ingredients? Yes, every prominent family has a fixed food supply, and they can exchange what they need afterward. They only come to the vegetable market to replenish if their residence lacks any. Or when they want to buy some wild game for a change of taste. Very few people buy anything from the market in large quantities. Old Granny Ma said. Zhou nodded in understanding. She returned late yesterday, so she didn't go to the manor. It seemed that she really had to go over as soon as possible. At the very least, she had to confirm what food was available at their manor. Otherwise, after leaving the prince's mansion, she would not be able to afford anything to eat, or at least not openly. Chapter 467 Receiving Guests. Zhou eventually just bought some dried vegetables, radishes, and cabbages and ordered more from them. She also purchased a 20-pound pork belly strip and delivered it to Qiunyang. At the same time, she bought a wild rabbit, a big, green carp that weighed about 5 pounds, and a piece of fat meat for Granny Ma to carry back to the manor. After Zhou returned to the prince's mansion, she sat down and drank a glass of water just as Yang Wanning walked in with a basket of snacks. Behind her was Yang Qinglin, who was looking around curiously. Greetings, cousin sister-in-law, Yang Wanning greeted after she entered. Greetings, cousin sister-in-law. Yang Qinglin followed suit and bowed. Box novel. Come, take a seat. Oh, there's no need to bring a gift over. Zhou greeted them with a smile. It's nothing much, just some snacks I made myself. You and Qingrui can try it and see if it suits your taste. After Yang Wanning finished speaking, she handed the basket to Granny Ma. Granny Ma saw this and immediately carried them away. She later served them a cup of tea and prepared a plate of small fried dough twists. Seeing that Gu Qingrui was nowhere to be seen, Yang Wanning asked, has Qingrui taken up his post so quickly? Yeah, he'll officially start working today. Zhou nodded, looked at Yang Qinglin and asked, Qinglin is on vacation today. Yes, he's back for today and tomorrow, so I brought him here. Yang Wanning answered. I see. Qinglin, you're 12 this year. Did you pass the scholar's exam yet? Zhou asked Yang Qinglin. Yang Qinglin shook his head. Not yet. I didn't take it before the snow disaster, and it hasn't been held since then. This is why one haven't taken the scholar's exam. What level are you at now? I'm in Class A. I'll definitely pass the student test, but one think it will be difficult for me to pass the scholar test. Zhou saw that he was answering every question, but it was obvious that he had no intention of holding a two-way conversation. She nodded and said, "That's good. All right, study hard and strive to become a scholar in one fell swoop when the test is held. How have you been these 2 days? Is the family stable?" she then asked Yang Wanning. "It's all right for now," Yang Wanning said. "That's good. We'll move to our new residence in 2 days. When you're free, do come over for a visit." "No problem, as long as you don't find us annoying." "How could that be the case?" Zhou shook her head. The two of them chatted for a while more. After noticing Yang Qinglin was getting impatient, she stood up and said, "Do stay for lunch today, and I'll cook 2 dishes myself so you can try my cooking." "Sure, one heard that your skills are great, and I hope one can learn a few moves." Yang Wanning was about to follow her to the small kitchen after that. Zhou looked at Yang Qinglin with a troubled expression. She couldn't just leave him alone in here. "Qinglin, do you know how to clean a rabbit?" she asked. "No, I've never been in the kitchen. Are you interested in learning? If you are, come together." After Zhou finished speaking, she walked out with Yang Wanning. Yang Qinglin followed her, but he didn't go to the kitchen. Instead, he wandered around the courtyard. Seeing this, Zhou ignored him. She took out the rabbit and fish and quickly slaughtered them. Then, with the help of Granny Ma and Yang Wanning, they quickly cooked up a feast. Soon, a dish of braised rabbit meat and a bowl of fish ball soup were made. The rich aroma of meat attracted Yang Qinglin's attention. Seeing this, Zhou scooped a bowl of fish ball soup for him and handed it to him. "Try it and see how it tastes." "Thank you, don't mind if I do." Yang Qinglin took the bowl and went back to the dining room. Zhou looked at his taken-for-granted expression and immediately frowned. Chapter 468 discovered a problem. However, she didn't bother to say anything to him. Instead, she took out some mushrooms and cabbage from the kitchen and made a stir-fried mushroom with meat slices, pickled cabbages, and finally, a plate of shredded seaweed. When the cooking was almost done, Gu Qingrui rushed back. He smelled a familiar smell and remembered Yang Wanning and the others were coming over today. After he went to the kitchen to greet Yang Wanning, he turned around to return to the dining room. "Is King Rui back yet?" Zhou asked hurriedly. "Yeah, we came back together." Gu Qingrui replied and paused. 111 asked him to come over and eat with us. Box novel. No, it's not convenient with Wanning here. Just bring some fishball soup over to him. After Zhou finished speaking, she took a bowl of soup and handed it to him. "That's true. 111 be back soon." Gu Qingrui took the soup bowl and headed toward the main courtyard. At this moment, Yang Qinglin ran out and chased after him. "You're my third cousin, right? I'll go with you." Yang Qinglin. Gu Qingrui looked at the young man beside him and asked. "Yes, he'll go with you. I haven't met King Rui yet." Yang Qinglin said expectantly. "Hurry up, then. The soup will get cold soon." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he walked straight ahead. Meanwhile, Yang Qinglin jogged behind him. However, when they reached the main courtyard, Yang Qinglin shrank back and hesitated at the entrance. Gu Qingrui didn't force him, and he sent the soup in. When he came out, he looked at him and asked, "Didn't you want to see the third prince? Why don't you go in? The people around him are very fierce." After Yang Qinglin said that, he glanced at the guards guarding the place. "What are you afraid of? Those people are protecting him. As long as you behave yourself, no one will make things difficult for you." Gu Qingrui thought of something and asked, your father's study room should also be guarded, no? I haven't been to my father's study. You haven't been there. That's right. No one in the family is allowed to approach my father's study. Your mother hasn't been there either. I heard she has been there, but I don't remember. Does your father treat you well? So. He's busy all day long. Other than asking about homework, we rarely meet and talk. Who usually takes care of you, then? Previously, it was my mother. Now, it's my stepmother and my sister. Stepmother. Is she good to you? I'm the family's legitimate son, and my mother's dowry is in her hands. Even if I bullied Qingsen, she never dared to complain. Gu Qingrui narrowed his eyes and said, your stepmother sure treats you well. Of course, I've never been scolded before. In the summer, one asked for a parrot and spent 100 taels on it. She paid for it, no matter how painful it was for her wallet. After that, Qingsen wanted to spend 10 taels on a carrier pigeon, but he was turned down. It's because she lacks a dowry and the confidence to spend money. Who told you that she's not confident because she doesn't have a dowry? My stepmother said so. My grandmother also said that when she married into the family, she only brought a few pieces of clothing with her, she didn't even have any jewelry. Is that so? But that's not what your sister said. She didn't even have a decent dress when she attended the palace banquet a few days ago, and many others laughed at her. How is that possible? Qingsen said my sister was wearing a custom-made dress that cost more than 1,000 taels. I asked someone to order those clothes. Impossible. Young Qinglin looked at him warily and angrily, saying, the Gu family's assets have been confiscated. You'd better not sow discord between us. Chapter 469 Bet 1. After saying that, he didn't even give Gu Qingrui a chance to speak before he ran back. Gu Qingrui looked at his back and was a little surprised. It seemed that the Chui ladies had put a lot of effort into tricking him. Otherwise, he would not be so protective of them. He didn't bother to explain anymore and quickly followed him. Young Qinglin returned to the dining room and saw Yang Wanning, who was setting up the table, and he went forward to pull her out. Young Wanning looked at his angry expression and asked in confusion, Qinglin, where are you going? Box novel. Calm, going home. Don't interact with the Gu family in the future. Young Changlin said as he continued to walk out. Young Wanning was stunned by his answer. She grabbed him and asked patiently, what happened? Tell me first. Cousin tried to sow discord between us. He said he was the one who ordered the dress you wore to the palace banquet. Young Qinglin glared at Gu Qingrui, who had just entered. Gu Qingrui ignored him and walked away. It was better to leave this bumbling kid to Yang Wanning to handle. Otherwise, saying more would only exacerbate the situation because he was an outsider. Yang Wanning heard this, and while she didn't know why they brought it up, she realized she needed to clarify things today. If her cousin had a disagreement with them, they would be isolated and helpless in the future. Thinking of this, she stared at him and said earnestly, that's right. One asked my Qingrui to help order that dress for me because the dress that Mrs. Chui prepared for me is not presentable. Impossible. Young Qinglin didn't believe it. You, the third prince, Granny Lu, and even some of the madams who attended the palace banquet know about this. If you don't believe me, impossible. Even when our stepmother mistreats her own children, she has never mistreated us. If you say that again, 111 never talk to you again. Young Qinglin shook off his sister's hand and turned to run out. You, come back here. Young Wanning shouted and wanted to chase after him. Gu Qingrui shook his head when he saw this. It'd be better not to chase after him. He's an ingrate who regards a thief as his mother. What's the point of chasing after him? Young Qinglin, who had almost run out of the courtyard, immediately turned around and retorted angrily, "Who are you calling an ingrate? Who do you think? Do you dare to make a bet with me?" Gu Qingrui looked at him with contempt. He knew very well that children at this age were rebellious. He had accepted that Yang Qinglin wouldn't turn back until he hit a wall. As a result, provoking his rebellious spirit and allowing him to dig out the truth himself was the only way he could see the truth. Although Yang Qinglin couldn't understand what Gu Qingrui was doing, he could tell he was being looked down upon. What are we betting? What if you lose?" he demanded with high spirits. "If I lose, 111 give you 10,000 taels of silver. If you lose," Gu Qingrui shook his head. "Even if you lose, you won't be able to give me anything. How about this, if you lose, you'll be my errand boy for 5 years. Impossible. If one lose, I'll give you 100,000 taels of silver. It looks like you're confident in yourself. I'll accept that proposal then, 100,000 taels of silver. If you can't take it out by then, sell yourself to me and be my servant for 5 years. All right, then it's settled." Yang Wanning looked at Yang Qinglin speechlessly, but she was happy to see this through. It would be great if she could let him see the true colors of the Chui ladies through this bet. Chapter 470 Bet 2, You show me if you have 10,000 taels of silver first. Yang Qinglin was shocked to see him accept the bet. No problem. After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he turned to look at Zhou Ying. Zhou Ying nodded and went back to the residence. She took out 10,000 taels of silver from her interspace and brought it back to the dining room. 10 silver notes worth 1,000 taels each. Do you want to count them? Yang Qinglin stepped forward to take a look. He was stunned when he saw the banknote with a face value of 1,000 taels. He hadn't expected them to have so much silver on them. Could it be that they actually gave the dress to his sister? Box novel. Calm seeing this, Zhou Ying kept the silver notes and said, "Let's eat first. After lunch, I'll let you check it personally." Gu Qingrui washed his hands and sat down. "Is the bet still on? It's still not too late to go back on your word." Yang Qinglin hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Let's bet." Despite his reservations, his stepmother had always granted all his requests, so he was confident she would not mistreat his sister. "All right, kid, hang in there." After speaking, Gu Qingrui picked up a piece of rabbit meat and said, "Eat more. We have to go out later." Yang Qinglin snorted indignantly but still lowered his head and obediently ate the rabbit meat. After lunch, Gu Qingrui went to the study room and took out a receipt. "Let's go. 111 bring you to verify the claims." "Wait, let's go together. I want to order a few new sets of bedding." Zhou Ying got up and brought Yang Wanning along with them. First, they went to look for Butler Feng, who helped them order some clothes. After getting his confirmation, they went to a cloth shop. Gu Qingrui took out the receipt and handed it to the shop owner. "Miss Hua, this is an order from your shop, right? Can you tell who ordered it?" Miss Hua took it and glanced at it. A blue wide-sleeved dress. Butler Feng of King Rui Manor ordered it for a guest. Including the jewelry, it costs 1,800 taels of silver. "Thank you, miss." After that, Gu Qingrui looked at Yang Qinglin and asked, "How? Do you believe me now?" He then looked at Zhou Ying and said, "Since you're here, let's see if there's anything suitable. Let's make 2 more sets, the craftsmanship here is amazing." When Miss Hua heard about more business opportunities, she immediately brought Zhou Ying and Yang Wanning to look at their clothes. At this moment, Gu Qingrui pressed one hand on Yang Qinglin's shoulder and asked, "So, do you believe me? If you don't believe me, let's look for King Rui or Granny Lu in the palace. where you can find any official wives from the various families that attended the banquet. Impossible. Young Qinglin replied weakly. He didn't want to believe that the Chui ladies would not even give his sister a decent dress. But why would they grant his every request? Was it because he was the legitimate son? What's impossible? How about we make another bet? Gu Qingrui suggested it with a smile. What do you want? Young Qinglin looked at him warily. Gu Qingrui smiled and whispered in his ear, "Do you dare?" Young Qinglin hesitated for a moment. No matter what, he would have to win this time. The key was that if he won this new bet, he wouldn't have to be Gu Shengru's errand boy for 5 years. He nodded and stated, "Let's bet." "All right. You have to remember that you can't leak anything we say or do. Otherwise, this bet will be voided." "Don't worry, I'm not a sore loser." "It's settled, then." On the other end, under Ai Sua's introduction, Shouing spent a total of 1,400 taels of silver. She ordered 2 medium-grade dresses for herself, 2 robes for Gu Qingrui, and a cloak for Yang Wanning. Chapter 471 Entrustment. After coming out, the 4 of them went to another cloth shop next door to order bedding. However, cotton was now costly. 1 pound of cotton was going for 500 coppers, so she only ordered 10 bed sheets as a backup. It was getting late after they left the store, and Gu Qingrui went straight to his office. Shouing brought the siblings to her new residence. When Yang Qinglin entered, he ran to the rockery to look at the goldfish. Yang Wanning followed her around the courtyard and said, "This residence is really not bad. It's much better than the Yang residence." Box novel. Where is it that is better? Size, first of all. The Yang residence is just an ordinary 3-entrance courtyard. There are no rockeries, gardens, or places for sightseeing. Another thing is that the buildings here are more magnificent and exquisite. All because we benefited from Princess Ping Yang. One heard that this was Princess Ping Yang's dowry. No wonder. Yang Wanning nodded. After confirming that no one was nearby, she hesitated and said, "Shouing, one feel that Mrs. Chui wants to spoil Qingling rotten, but no matter how much one try to persuade him, he won't believe me. Can you help me come up with an idea?" After hearing that, Shouing turned to face her. For a brief moment, Shouing was unsure whether Yang Wanning was truly out of ideas or if she was attempting to approach her to gain information from her. After all, this was her second life. Shouing did not believe that Yang Wanning could not come up with a solution to such a simple problem. But Shouing still answered, as the saying goes, hearing is inaccurate, and seeing is believing. But one don't think even seeing something with your own eyes is necessarily true. Therefore, you must find a way to guide him to discover the truth independently. Just like today, he didn't believe we helped you order the dress, but didn't he lower his head when confronted with the facts, witnesses, and evidence? Yang Wanning nodded but felt slightly bitter inwardly because the Chui ladies were utterly different in front of her and Qinglin. She would have to put in more effort if she wanted to expose her. Yang Wanning took a roll of banknotes from her sleeve and handed it to Shouing. "Shouing, I'm sorry to trouble you, but one need your help to keep these silver notes for me. The Yang residence is not safe." "How much is this?" 50,000 taels of silver. It's the money my mother left for me. But recently, things have been very unpleasant because of the dowry. Mrs. Chui took this opportunity and asked me to train the dowry maids, so she sent 6 maids into my courtyard. I'm afraid they will find out one have this money. It won't be easy to get back my mother's dowry at that time. You trust me that much? Aren't you afraid that I'll just take them? I can trust you. Besides, you've saved me from 2 disasters in a row, so it's only fair that I award you this silver. If you can use it, then use it. All right, Just based on your words, 111 help you keep the money. But, you must know you can't tell anyone about me helping you out. Don't worry, I know who is and isn't my ally. Zhou Ying nodded and kept the silver notes. She threw them into the villa in her interspace under the cover of her sleeve. After that, the two women chatted for a while. Zhou Ying looked at the time and gave Qiu Nyang a few reminders before leaving. After that, the siblings returned to the Yang residence, while Zhou Ying returned to the prince's residence. She took a look at the pastries that Yang Wanning had brought over. There was juju paste cake, osmanthus cake, pot helmet biscuits, and sesame sauce chips. All of them were splendid and cute, and it was a display of excellent dessert-making skills. After taking out half of each, the rest was split between Granny Ma and the other two helpers. After dinner, Gu Qingrui asked, after one left, "Did Yang Qinglin make things difficult for you?" Chapter 472 Making a Move. No, but Yang Wanning asked me to help keep her 50,000 silver. Zhou Ying replied after confirming that there was no one else around. It seems that my aunt is not that stupid. At least she saw the problem at the last minute and left something for her daughter. It's a pity that she's too soft-hearted. If she had divorced when she was alive or if she had split her assets and lived elsewhere, Yang Wanning and her brother wouldn't have ended up this way. Even if she has that intention, Yang Shiqing won't agree. Moreover, with her old-fashioned thinking, she won't necessarily have the courage to leave. When Gu Qingrui said this, he thought of Gu Zi. Wasn't she also forced into a divorce as a last resort? Box novel. That's true. Oh right, keep an eye on the Yang residence tomorrow afternoon. Maybe there will be a good show. You didn't do anything, did you? I just made another bet with Yang Qinglin. Zhou Ying looked at him suspiciously and asked, "What did you bet on?" "I just teach him how to discover Mrs. Cui's true colors." Gu Qingrui told her his plan after he finished speaking. "I'm not going to lie, that's pretty despicable of you. Not only can you let him see the true colors of Mrs. Cu, but you can also sow discord between them, mother and son. It's impolite not to take the offer when given." On the other end, after Zhou Jiaqing found out that Qiu Nyang's family had been redeemed, she was so angry that she slapped Zissou a dozen times. "You idiot! Can't you even do something this simple? Go straight to the laundry room tomorrow." Zissou nodded and left without saying anything. Not only did she not feel dejected, she also heaved a sigh of relief. A second-class maid, Lian Qiao, saw this and went forward to comfort her, saying, "Sister Zissou, don't be too sad. The missus just got into a fit of anger. When her anger subsides, she will definitely call you back." Zissou looked at her gloating expression and sneered inwardly. "Thank you for the kind words," she replied calmly. After saying that, she covered her face and left. She clearly understood Zhou Jiaqing's character over the past few years. If she really did as she said that day, not only would Zhou Jiaqing not reward her, but she would still blame her for abandoning her mistress. Regardless of what she chooses, she will be unable to satisfy Zhou Jiaqing and will get punished. Therefore, it was better to leave her side as soon as possible. Lian Qiao looked at Zissou's back as she left and sneered. She turned around and walked in with a broom and dustpan. She quickly swept away the things that Zhou Jiaqing had broken and said, "Young miss, I have something I don't know if I should say." "Just say if there's something you want to say. I'm not in the mood to be polite with you now." Zhou Jiaqing leaned on the bed and replied impatiently. "Actually, there's no need to mess with Hai Tang or the others if you want to ruin Zhou Ying. Don't you think Zhou Ying has problems when she's been married for so many years and has no children? Also, they have just established their residence. I'm sure they will be buying servants, so if you arrange for one or two people to go in and win her husband's favor, then she, Zhou Jiaqing paused after hearing that. She thought of her mother, who cried daily to gain her father's favor, and how she became numbed by everything. Zhou Jiaqing was instantly exhilarated by the idea. That's right, what women cared about the most was their husband's love. How miserable would Zhou Ying's fate be if she lost her love and had no child to rely on? She quickly replied, 111 leave arranging this to you. Find me 2 girls. Yes, I will do my best. Lian Qiao turned around and walked out. When she was outside, she quickly threw down the things in her hands and ran out happily. She firmly believed that as long as this task was carried out smoothly, she would definitely become her Mrs. Best confidant. At that time, she would ride the tide and might one day be a concubine. Chapter 473 Introducing miniature statues. On the other end, Zhou Ying did not notice their schemes. Instead, she sat in the study, writing down a list of things she wanted to buy next. She planned which items could be taken out of her interspace and which could not. The most challenging item for her was food because, so far, the grain stores had yet to open. After thinking about it, there was only one way left, and that was to use Mother Goddess as a cover to put some food into her residence. However, the prerequisite was that she had to go to the Mother Goddess temple and go through with the prayers. At the thought of this, she suddenly thought of the small Buddha statues that were usually worshipped at a person's home. It seemed that she had to bring this plan forward. Box novel. It would allow Mother Goddess statue to enter thousands of households, allowing people to worship her at all times and advancing her legacy even further. It was unlike before when people looked down on or even abandoned Mother Goddess. Thus, when she entered her interspace at night, she began to select servants for the various Mother Goddess temples through her followers' faith. However, she did not choose any young and beautiful women. Instead, she chose widows who had no one to rely on, determined, kind, and well-kept. She then entered their dreams to offer them this position. Of course, she never forced any of them. It was up to them whether they wanted to go or not. After half a night, she chose 4 servants for each temple. At the same time, she told them their responsibilities. One was to ensure that the Mother Goddess temple was clean and tidy, and the other was to help out the people who went to offer prayers. There was also another mission, which was to sell her statues or offer them in exchange for something. However, only those who were kind-hearted and had merit could receive such a reward. Of course, people could also bring a statue they made to the Mother Goddess temple to be blessed. However, whether they could succeed or not was another story. After finishing her work in her interspace, she began to carve Mother Goddess statues with the wood from her interspace. She then painted it and injected a trace of her spiritual power into it. Only the statues she injected with her power were the real deal. The next day, when it was almost noon, the news of Mother God choosing servants had basically spread throughout the country. When Zhou Ying brought Granny Ma to the streets to buy some food, she also heard about it. Moreover, the news of inviting a statue of the Mother Goddess spread throughout the capital. She also heard that many others had already started donating daily necessities to the 4 maidservants here. At noon, she heard that the 4 maidservants from the capital had already arrived, bringing her another bundle of faith points. On the way back, Granny Ma suddenly asked, "Mrs. Gu, you heard about Mother Goddess choosing maidservants. Why does she choose widows who live alone after the age of 40? Maybe she wants someone free of burden. Also, she probably wants someone with a steady heart so that they can serve Mother Goddess wholeheartedly. Otherwise, the Mother Goddess temple would be defiled." Granny Ma was stunned for a moment. She remembered what she had heard before, that some temples took the opportunity to do some dirty things. She nodded in understanding and replied, "It seems that Mother Goddess has seen through everything." Zhou Ying smiled silently at that. After dinner, Zhou Ying brought Granny Ma to her new residence after dinner to check on the progress. She found that the main courtyard had been repaired and the heated floor connected to the fireplace. However, because the walls had just been painted, the moment she'd entered the room, it was as if she had entered the middle of summer. It was stuffy and hot, so she quickly turned around and walked out. She then found Chiu Nyang and gave her 2,000 taels of silver to pay for and settle the renovation. She sent all kinds of supplies to the residence, found the foreman, and asked him to connect the front and backyards with heated flooring. As for the two side courtyards and guest rooms, there was no hurry for that. Otherwise, it would be too late to move in when it was cold. After returning to the imperial residence, she remembered the show that Gu Qingrui had mentioned yesterday and then spread out her spiritual senses to look at the Yang residence. Chapter 474 Realization. She saw Yang Qinglin holding 100 taels of silver and a set of stationery in Mrs. Cui's room. He was showing off to Yang Qingxin. So, you lost to me, didn't you? I told you long ago that it doesn't matter, even if you're your mother's biological son. I'm still the family's legitimate son, you can never surpass me. Impossible. My mother must be doing this for my own good. The 8-year-old Yang Qingxin shouted anxiously. He threw herself into Mrs. Chui's arms and said, Mother, please. You have to give me 100 taels of silver as pocket money too. There's also the stationery. No, I don't want that. I remember that my father bought a few small wolf hair quills. I just want one small box novel. Calm, Qingxin, don't mess around. Your father bought the wolf hair quills to write memorials. Before Mrs. Chui could finish her words, Yang Qingxin pushed him away and yelled, No. I want it. Who is your son? Why do you always side with him? One hate you. Tisk. Seeing this, Yang Qinglin snorted in disdain and turned to leave. After leaving the courtyard and seeing no one nearby, he walked around and squatted outside the back window. All right, he's gone now. Don't cry. Mrs. Chui pulled Yang Qingxin up and said. Yang Qingxin immediately laughed and said, Mother, how was my acting? He's such an idiot to show off in front of me. He can't wait for his father to deal with him when he returns. You're the smarter boy, no? However, you have to keep an eye on him. The inkstone he took is a really expensive one. Even your father can't bring himself to use it. Don't let that dumbass lose it. Otherwise, your mother will also be in trouble. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on him. Yang Qingxin replied obediently, Mother, I have taken a fancy to a folding fan at Hingtong Pawn Shop. How much? 800 taels. It's an authentic work of Master Wu, and its value will definitely increase in the future. Alright, if it's confirmed to be true, Mother will buy it for you. But I'll say it here first, you're not allowed to simply show it off. I know. I'm not that idiot. I definitely won't be a good-for-nothing. Yang Qinglin couldn't hear what they said next, and all he knew was that he had been schemed against by the mother and son. After that, he walked back to his courtyard in a daze. However, he almost tripped over a rock because he did not look where he was going. Zhou Ying quickly used her spiritual power to help him stabilize his body. Who's there? Mrs. Chui shouted. Yang Qinglin was so frightened that he immediately snapped out of his daze and ran on tiptoe. Zhou Ying quickly erased Yang Qinglin's traces and put a cat down. Mrs. Chui was about to look around when the cat jumped from the roof and landed on the opposite tree. It turned around and meowed at her. What bad luck! Mrs. Chui couldn't help but curse out loud. She quickly closed the window after that. As soon as Yang Qinglin returned to his courtyard, Little Shu, the errand boy, approached him. Seeing his panic-stricken appearance, he quickly asked, Young master, what's wrong? Yang Qinglin opened his mouth, but when he thought of Gu Shengruo's warning, he changed his words and said, "I'm fine, I just asked for a set of good inkstones. I just tripped on the way and almost hit you." "Oh, do you want to bring it to the academy?" Little Shoe asked. "No, I'll give it to my sister. This is a good one, so I'll be keeping it." "Oh right, hurry up and pack your luggage. Well, set off when I'm back." "Understood, young master." Little Shoe turned around and returned to his room to pack his luggage afterwards. Yang Qinglin then went straight to Yang Wanning's courtyard. Chapter 475. A heart-to-heart talk between siblings. After entering, he saw Yang Wanning dressed plainly and sitting in the courtyard, embroidering a purse. He was stunned for a moment and greeted her as he walked over. "Sis. Qinglin, why are you here? I was just about to look for you." Yang Wanning was surprised and handed the purse to him. "See if you like it." Yang Qinglin nodded and took it, but he didn't reply. Instead, he looked at the person beside her. Yang Wanning, shocked by his intentions, got up and brought him back to her room. She asked Chun Shi to stand guard outside and whispered, "What's wrong?" Yang Qinglin then handed the inkstone to her and told her about his bet with Gu Qingrui and the conversation between his stepmother and her son. "Sister, is this a scheme from them?" Box novel. Calm Yang Wanning was pleasantly surprised by this, as she was still thinking about how to expose the true colors of Mrs. Chui to her brother. She did not expect her cousin to solve it this quickly. It seemed that she had to change her way of thinking. Instead of passively defending against their schemes, she needed to take the initiative to attack. At the thought of this, her expression turned solemn as she explained to him in a low voice what they were doing, putting him on a pedestal and waiting for him to fall. Ultimately, she said, "Some people's words are harsh, but their intention is kind. Mrs. Chui is the opposite. On the surface, they treated you well, but in the dark, they wanted to raise you into a good-for-nothing. In the end, when father can't take your attitude anymore, he will give up on you. You won't even be able to return home at that time." What a vicious woman. Yang Qinglin gritted his teeth at that. No wonder Mrs. Chui repeatedly warned Yang Qingsen not to end up this way. He quickly asked his sister, "But why is she so harsh to you?" "First, I'm old enough not to fall for her tricks. Also, I'm a girl, so father won't pay much attention to me." Yang Wanning sighed and continued, "You just have to remember that she has a son and a daughter. Even if she's good to us, she definitely has a motive. But you're still young, so you have to protect yourself. So you just have to act like before and do what you should do." If he could take the opportunity to ask for more things or silver from her, then secretly save them. But you have to know what to do. Study hard and strive to learn more skills. It's best if you can always surpass Yang Qingsen in your studies, as only then will father not give up on you. After a few years, you'll have a firm foothold in my household. Only then can we siblings be able to confront them openly. I understand, sis. I'll be more careful in the future. Remember, you can bully Yang Qingsen, but don't overdo it. Once you overdo it, Mrs. Chui will think you are a threat. She will then suppress you or even kill you. She wouldn't dare, would she? There's nothing she doesn't dare to do. Just be careful in the future. Also, when you interact with your friends and servants, you should pay more attention to them. After observing them for some time, you should see if they are worth making friends with. Don't simply trust others. I understand. Yang Wanning heaved a sigh of relief and teased, "You lost again this time. It looks like you have to be Shengru's errand boy for 5 years. I'm still studying. I don't have time." Yang Qinglin spoke proudly. "But you have holidays. I think you can spend a day with him and learn something from him. Based on my observations, the couple are quite good people and sincere in helping us." At the very least, they don't have the intention to harm us. Young Qinglin hesitated momentarily and said, next time, when there's another holiday, one will go and take a look. Cousin might not have time to bring me along now. Chapter 476 Good news. Alright, let's see how it goes. If Qingrui is willing to take you in, don't act like a spoiled brat. There's no harm in learning from him. Got it. This stationery set is great, so can you help me keep it well? One have to go to the academy. Safe trip, and remember what I said. Think before acting when encountering something, and don't be impulsive. One understand. Young Qinglin affirmed this as he walked out with the embroidered purse. On the other end, Zhou smiled after watching them. These two young people seemed promising, and she did not help them in vain. Box novel. Calm as for how much she could help them, it would depend on their performance. In Shanghe village, the patriarch was brushing a cow when manager Lu came in with a letter and said, Brother Gu, congratulations to you and the Gu clan. The patriarch was stunned by what he said and asked, Brother Lu, come in and take a seat. After saying that, he tied the cow to the side and invited manager Lu into his house. After sitting down, he poured him a cup of water and asked, Brother Lu, what's the congratulations about? Because of the promotion of sweet potatoes, the emperor has already forgiven the Gu family. Under the Ministry of Works, a new branch is formed, named the Department of Agriculture. Gu Qingrui is now a third-grade officer of the Department of Agriculture, specializing in researching ways to increase grain production. Really? That's great. It seems that our Gu clan has hope again. Indeed, but you still have to keep a low profile. One understand. Seeing this, manager Lu took out Gu Shengrui's letter and said, I heard that all the men of the Gu family had gone away on long trips. It's not convenient for me to visit them alone, so I specially came to request help from Brother Gu to deliver these 2 letters to the Gu family. Alright, let's go over. The patriarch stood up afterwards. He informed his wife, Mrs. Gu, and brought manager Lu to the Gu family. Uncle, shopkeeper Lu, what a rare combination. What brings the both of you here? Gu Qingxi, drying herbs in the courtyard, immediately approached them and invited them into the living room. Didn't you go to town to study medicine? Are you slacking off? The patriarch turned his head and asked Gu Qingxi. Oh, I was there half a day in the morning and came back in the afternoon to study by myself. Good. It is great that you are now allowed to practice medicine alone. Don't waste this chance. After saying that, the 3 of them reached the living room. Hearing the commotion, Madame Qiao also came out of her room with the help of Mrs. Yao. Seeing the 3 of them, she immediately invited them to take a seat. After the patriarch sat down, he said quickly, Third aunt, manager Lu has brought us good news. The Gu clan was acquitted because of Gu Qingrui and the others' promotion of sweet potatoes. Moreover, Gu Qingrui has also become a third-grade official. Really? Mrs. Yao asked with a face full of surprise. Why would one lie to you about such a thing? The patriarch smiled and nodded. Manager Lu nodded and handed the 2 letters to the old madam. These are 2 letters sent by Officer Gu. Please take a look and see if there is a need to reply. If there is, write it down and send it to my manor. They will hand it over to me. One really appreciate it. I can die in peace now, knowing that the Gu clan will not face any punishment during my lifetime. Madame Qiao was overjoyed when she received the message. Good days are coming in the future. You have to take care of yourself and live to an old age. Manager Lu stood up and added, one still have something to do, so one won't disturb you anymore. Goodbye. One see. I'll send you off. The patriarch sent manager Lu out after that. Madame Chiao hurriedly followed Mrs. Yao and then asked Gu Qingxi to gather everyone at home, including Mrs. Lu and her daughter, who were in the tea shop. After everyone had arrived, Madame Chiao gave the letter to the patriarch and said, "Qingxi, read it." Chapter 477 Letter, Sure, Third Aunt. The patriarch responded. He lowered his head and opened the first letter. It happened to be the one written by Gu Qingruo about the good news that Manager Lu had told them. However, Gu Qingruo reminded them to keep a low profile. Is this telling us not to return to the capital? Mrs. Lu asked discontentedly. If you want to go, no one will stop you. But if you lose your life, don't blame Qingruo for not reminding you. Madame Chiao answered unhappily. Box novel. Calm, haven't we already been exonerated? Why are we still staying in the village? So what if we're exonerated? It's not like you don't know how complicated the relationship in the capital is. Even a vegetable seller might be related to the Prime Minister. What about you? If something happens, who will be protecting you? We should stay here obediently. Isn't there Qingruo? Qingruo is counting on the third prince himself. He would not have told us to keep a low profile if he had the confidence. Since he highlighted this, it means the capital is not peaceful now. Madame Chiao explained. Indeed. Although the princes have been crowned kings, the emperor still hasn't appointed a crown prince. I'm sure there will be a fight for power, so we should just stay here. Mrs. Yao said. When Mrs. Lu heard their words, she immediately shut her mouth. She had already been cannon fodder once and did not want to be in the same position again. The patriarch opened the second letter but didn't say a single word until he finished reading it. Quickly, he looked at the old madam with a worried expression. Brother, what's wrong? Did something happen? Mrs. Yao asked as she took a glance. Seeing this, the patriarch handed the letter to her. Mrs. Yao took the letter, and after reading it, she also became silent. Madame Chiao noticed their silence and suddenly had a bad premonition. She asked with a dark face, "What's wrong? If you have something to say, say it." Mrs. Yao hesitated momentarily and answered, "Little sister passed away, and the two children are not doing well in the Yang family. Qingruo asked us if we had a list of her dowry. He asked us to send it over through Manager Lu if we had it. If not, he told us to make a fake copy quickly. Here is it." Before she could finish her words, Madame Chiao gasped for air and fainted. Grandma, third aunt. Gu Qingxi and the patriarch immediately rushed over and shouted. Qingxi, hurry up and take a look at your grandmother. Mrs. Yao walked over and urged. When Gu Qingxi heard that, he immediately took Madame Chiao's pulse. A moment later, he told Gu Ziqiu, bring a needle and an oil lamp over. He and the patriarch then quickly carried Madame Chiao into her bedroom. Gu Ziqiu ran out and brought over the necessities when she heard this. Gu Qingxi immediately lit the oil lamp and used it to disinfect the needle. He then stabbed Madame Chiao's fingers and toes one after another. After letting out some blood, Madame Chiao finally woke up slowly. However, her spirit seemed to have dissipated, and she became listless and weak. What else did the letter say? Well, there's also a list of dowries they copied somehow. Mrs. Yao replied. Madame Chiao knew then that the Yang family had swallowed her daughter's dowry and couldn't help but sneer. Yang Shiqing, what a good son-in-law you are. The Gu family had treated him well, but this bastard returned kindness with ingratitude. How could he not even treat his own children well? When the patriarch heard this, he was reminded of his daughter's encounter and did not know what to say. The rough and ready, lowly peasants are more likely to do the right thing. It's the scholars who always let you down. Gu Qingxi shook his head and said. You're good, kid. You don't read much, but you can recite your idioms. The patriarch mentioned in surprise. Chapter 478 Going to the Mother Goddess Temple. One heard it from my Qingrui. Gu Qingxi scratched his head. Madame Qiao ignored them and looked at Mrs. Yao. Did the letter mention when they needed the list? They didn't mention that. I'll leave this matter to you. When Qingxi returns, get him to make a copy and send it to the manor quickly. All right. Mrs. Yao nodded. Box novel. Calm, you're all dismissed. After Madame Qiao finished speaking, she looked at the patriarch and said, Qingxi, I'll leave the matters of the clan to you. Also, let the children continue to study and don't delay any longer. I understand, third aunt. Have a good rest. If there's anything, tell Qingxi to come and find me. The patriarch gave Gu Qingxi a few more instructions before leaving. He personally went to every house of the Gu clan to inform them of the news. The happiest person was Gu Qingxi. Back then, he had been cut off from the imperial examinations as soon as he passed the elementary scholar examination. Now that they were cleared of their crimes, he wanted to reach the next level in scholarship. That night, Showing entered her interspace and scanned the various mother goddess temples, finding that all the maidservants were already in place. However, their living conditions differed. For example, the living conditions were more comfortable in the capital and its borders. In places like Shanghe village, where there was only a small temple, the mother goddess temple was separated into two parts by wood and cloth. The outside was where the mother goddess statue was placed, and the inside half was divided into three smaller parts. The larger of the three parts was where they lived, while the smaller ones were the storeroom and kitchen. Seeing this, Showing distributed a miniature mother goddess statue to each temple. At the same time, she checked on all the temples and their conditions. She would give supplies to places with poorer conditions. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Realizing they were about to move out of the imperial residence, Showing asked Gu Qingrui, who was reading a medical book, Rui, are you free these 2 days? What's the matter? Gu Qingrui put down the medical book in his hand and asked. We are about to move to our new residence, but there is no food there. So, I want to go to the Mother Goddess Temple to offer a prayer and take a look at our manor too. Gu Qingrui paused and then remembered they did not have any grain reserves here or a manor as a cover to take food from the interspace. He put down the book and said with nuisance, if you didn't mention it, one would have really forgotten. I'll go to the office to report tomorrow morning. Then, 111 go with you and plan what to do with the manor. All right, then it's settled. Showing said. The next morning, after breakfast, Showing arranged a carriage. After Gu Qingrui returned, they went to the new residence to pick up Qiu Nyang and Hai Tang and set off for the Mother Goddess Temple together. When it was almost noon, they arrived at the temple. Noticing a stall selling incense outside the temple, Showing brought Qiu Nyang and Hai Tang to buy some for a tael of silver. After Gu Qingrui parked the carriage, they walked toward the Mother Goddess Temple. The Mother Goddess Temple in the capital was also halfway up a mountain, but it was obviously much larger. It occupied about 10 acres of land. The Mother Goddess Temple was at the front, and many guest rooms were around it. There was also an open garden at the back, which could be used to grow some vegetables for self-sufficiency. After walking around, Qiu Nyang said, this newly built Mother Goddess Temple is lovely. It's almost comparable to our national temple. Indeed, but it's much quieter. Moreover, the incense offerings here are much more frequent than at the national temple. Hai Tang nodded in agreement. So you've both been to the national temple? Showing asked in surprise. She had no memory of this from her original self. 2 years ago, there was no water in the village during. So, we were forced to evacuate to the national temple for a period of time. Xiaonyang explained. Chapter 479 The Manor's Present Situation. I see. Alright, let's go to the main hall. After Xiaoying finished speaking, she turned around and walked toward the main hall. After reaching the main hall, they queued for a while before it was their turn to go in and offer their incense. Xiaoying and the other three lit up 3 large joss sticks each, knelt down, and piously offered their prayers. Hey, look, the Mother Goddess statue is shining. Someone suddenly shouted. Really? What's going on? Is Mother Goddess going to manifest? Box novel. Calm, what are you saying? Doesn't Mother Goddess always answer our prayers? One do wonder what they're asking for. Could it be because they are offering more incense than us? That's possible. The incense they offer is many times ours. I guess we have to buy more next time we come. When the 4 maidservants heard the discussion, they looked up curiously and saw the flickering statue of the Mother Goddess. After all, this was the first time they had seen Mother Goddess react to a prayer. At the same time, they also respected Mother Goddess even more. After Xiaoying and the others got up, someone asked curiously, Madam, what are you asking for? It won't come through if one say it out loud. Xiaoying smiled and replied. After that, she placed 10 taels of silver as money offerings, then turned to leave. When everyone knew they wouldn't get anything out of her, they didn't ask any more. However, those who brought less incense went out to buy more. After Xiaoying and the others descended the mountain, they headed straight for the manor. After arriving at the manor, she asked around and found the person in charge, Head Fong. Head Fong was surprised when he saw them. He looked at Gu Qingrui and asked, Are you Lord Gu, the 3rd-grade agriculture officer? Yes, 1 a.m. You must be the Head Fong. We are here to understand the situation of this manor. Hurry up and come on in. Head Fong immediately led them into the manor excitedly. He asked his daughter to serve them tea. I've been waiting for master and mistress to come, and finally, you're here. Sorry to keep you waiting. Do let me know about the manor situation. Gu Qingrui nodded and said. Right, our village is full of cultivated land. Because it was close to the river, there are about 200 acres of paddy fields and 1,400 acres of dry land. However, ever since the water wheel was invented, we changed it to 800 acres of paddy fields and 800 acres of dry land. There were originally 486 people in the village, but after such a disastrous year, only 380 people are left. However, there are more able-bodied laborers within us, with 252 people. Today, due to the lack of seeds, they only planted 50 acres of rice and 100 acres of vegetables. We can make it through this winter. Head Fong paused and added, however, other than some radishes and cabbages left in the warehouse, the rest have already been distributed. Who was the original owner of this manor? Gu Qingrui asked curiously. Do you know Lord Fong? He was the original Minister of Revenue. He was someone who was raided together with the Gu family. I see. This manor belongs to the Fong family. Yes, to be exact, it's the Fong family's wife's dowry. It has always provided food and vegetables for the Fong residents. Later on, this place was managed by the royal family. The National Treasury distributed this year's rice seedlings, but the harvest was so-so because they were seeds from cold storage. Gu Qingrui nodded in understanding and asked, what seeds are left now? We did get some vegetable seeds today, with winter melons and pumpkins being the most. One intentionally asked them to leave those seeds behind when we ate them. Head Fong paused and asked, Lord Gu, what will we plant next year? Chapter 480 Preparing the greenhouse. The sweet potatoes are something we will plant for sure. I'll get someone to send some seeds over when spring comes. As for the rest, we would have to wait and see. However, we went to the Mother Goddess temple to ask for seeds today. It would be best if she could give us some. It's not bad to plant sweet potatoes. I heard that the yield of that crop is very high. It's all right. It's not a problem for 1 acre of sweet potatoes to feed 5 or 6 people. Oh, right, are the fields idle now? Gu Qingrui asked. Box novel. Calm, yes, they've been idle since we harvested the radishes and cabbages. All right, please prepare ash and other fertilizers over the next 2 days. I plan to try planting greenhouse vegetables. Greenhouse vegetables? Yes, it's an off-season dish in the winter. But we don't have a hot spring here. I'll build a greenhouse to grow vegetables in. We should be able to grow vegetables as long as the temperature is suitable and there is enough water and sunlight. Will it work? Let's try to plant them. If we succeed, the problem of having no vegetables in the winter will be solved. Moreover, we might even make a lot of money from the off-season vegetables. Head Fong understood how big the business opportunity was. He gritted his teeth and said, "All right, I'll bring some people to arrange it later." Is there an empty room in this manor? Shouing asked. Yes, there's a small courtyard. Every time the farming season gets busy, the previous owner will send people over. However, the masters are generally more willing to go to the hot spring manor, so the renovation there is better than average. Now, a widow from our manor is living there, helping to clean up occasionally. Take us there for a walk. Also, bring us around the manor and see where we could build the greenhouse. Sure, let's go over now. After Head Fong finished speaking, he led them to a green brick house at the end of the village. The courtyard wasn't big. There were 5 main rooms, 3 wing rooms in the east and west, a stable in the south, and a firewood shed. It looked neat and proper. Mrs. Wu, who was guarding the manor, was quickly called out. This is Mrs. Wu. She has been looking after the place. He then introduced Gu Qingrui and his wife to Mrs. Liu. Nice to meet you, master and mistress. Zhou Ying looked at the thin woman in front of her, whose hair had already turned white, and said, Nice to meet you too. I heard that you're a widow. Do continue your great work, and well take care of your retirement. When Mrs. Wu heard this, she immediately knelt down and kowtowed excitedly. Thank you, mistress. This servant will do her best to serve you. Please, get up. Qiunyang, Haitang, Zhou Ying said. Stay here and check out the place. Well, go outside and take a look. Sure. Qiunyang responded and brought Mrs. Wu and Haitang into the courtyard house. Meanwhile, the couple and Head Fong went to the fields to take a look. Finally, the location of the greenhouse was decided to be to the west of the manor. It was better to build it close by. Another thing was that the greenhouse would be built with mountains to the north and the manor to the east. A strong wind would weaken before hitting the greenhouse, no matter which direction it came from. There was no need to be concerned about the wind blowing the greenhouse over. After settling down, the 4 of them stayed in the manor for a meal. In the afternoon, Gu Qingrui gave Head Fong some instructions before the group returned to the capital. If we want to live in that courtyard, we need to do a major renovation. The beams of the main house are cracked, and the wall paint inside has fallen off a lot, and the roof tiles are also broken, Qiunyang said on the way. Is it that serious? Yes, according to Mrs. Wu, it was caused by the failure to clear the snow during the snowstorm. Chapter 481 Willingness. Mrs. Wu couldn't manage to clean it up in time. Yes, she said that she couldn't clean it all up by herself. What do you think of her? She seems quite honest at the moment, but she's a loner and doesn't like to talk much. She has lived alone for so many years, so it's normal for her to have a loner's personality. Box novel. Calm after that, Showing asked more about the specific situation in the house. She learned that the walls were fine, but since many rafters were broken, she decided to tear down the roof and repair it. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if it collapsed. After Showing went to her inner space at night, she deliberately checked Xiaonyang and Haitang's wishes. Besides the collective request for food, Showing did not expect them to ask for the whole family's safety. There was also Haitang's additional wish for another child. She took a serious look at their luck, realizing that they all had faint merit and good luck. There were no negative demerits to them at all. After that, she heard Gu Shengru's request for peace and all kinds of vegetable seeds. When Zhou saw this, she drew a safety talisman and imprinted it into their bodies. Zhou then ground some black flour from the wheat she had just harvested and gifted them 5,000 pounds of black flour, a jar of peanut oil, and some feed to their new residence. As for the seeds, she took out about an acre's worth of common vegetable seeds and 500 pounds of sweet potato seeds. She glanced at Mrs. Wu one last time and saw that, other than a faint trace of bad luck, she had no bloody aura, so she did not pay any more attention to her. Later, she busied herself with other people's requests. After finishing her work, Zhou collected the ripe crops in the inner space and took out some vegetables and fruits to make a salad. When Gu Qingrui was done with his work, the two of them quickly ate the prepared salad. After supper, Gu Qingrui said, "Babe, can you stew some donkey meat later? 1 a.m. craving them." "Now that you mention it, I'm craving it too." "Alright, let's make it for tomorrow night." Zhou told him about the seeds she had given him, placing them in their new manner. "I see, I'll have to hurry over tomorrow, then. I'll have to trouble you to take care of here for me." "Of course. Also, bring some silver when you go over tomorrow. Hurry up and get Headfong to find someone to repair the courtyard." "Alright, 111 remember it." After that, the two of them left the inner space and fell asleep. The next morning, Zhou went to the new residence after dinner. She walked to the storeroom door and saw Qianyang and her family gathered there. "What are you looking at?" Zhou asked. "Oh, you're here. Look. We really have food gifted to us, and it's all black flour. As long as we eat it sparingly, it won't be a problem for us to last for a year." Qianyang pulled her aside and pointed at the pile of grain in the storeroom. Zhou glanced at it and said, "That's great. It seems that we don't have to worry about food in the immediate future. However, we don't have to be too frugal, we just have to persist until next summer." Mrs. Xiao quickly asked, "Madam, can we exchange for some black flour? There are 2 children at home, and they can't eat grass-mixed noodles all the time." Qianyang was about to reprimand Mrs. Xiao when Zhou stopped her and said, "As long as you stay here for a day, you can eat with us, but you have to help us out part-time. After one find a shop for you, we'll talk about it when you'll move out." "Oh right, if you want to open a shop, what do you plan to sell, and how big of a place do you need? Have you thought about it?" "We want to sell snacks, so we don't need it to be big. Just the size of the kitchen in the residence will do." Zhou Dong quipped in. After Zhou heard this, she used her spiritual senses to scan the big kitchen. It wasn't small, about 50 square meters wide. She nodded and replied, "Alright, I'll take note of it. You guys can stay in the residence for the time being.